Everyone, it's the Coco Nomad, and welcome back to the channel where I talk about financial and location independence. I also share tips, tricks, and techniques to help you make a living and a life. And in this particular episode, I wanted to go over the stages of financial independence. If you've been following this channel recently, you know that I've been on this kick, on this journey for FIRE, financial independence, retire early. But one of the things that I never did was actually break down the steps, the levels, or the stages on the journey, on the way to achieving financial independence. And if you go out here on the internet, you'll notice and you'll find that there are lots of different versions of this. There'll be different levels. They'll call them levels. Some people call them stages. They will have different landmarks or metrics for when you've achieved a particular level. And for me, it was really hard to sort of like come up with my own. It was hard, even harder to follow some of the ones that were out there because it just didn't gel with the way I was trying to look at things. So what I decided to do was to construct my own, which is basically a combination of about 3 or 4 different ones. So a lot of this, if you're familiar with FIRE, will look familiar, and some of the steps may or may not, or just some of the metrics or milestones may look different to you. So let's just wanted to dive into that because I think it's the stages are important, and making those moves in stages and tracking your progress is important and helpful in sort of helping you along the way and giving yourself credit for when you've achieved, and not getting down on yourself, but also looking forward, knowing that there's more to go. So let's start with the first level. And I think the first level is basically where everybody's been at some point in their life, and that's the dependent level. This is where you need help paying bills. Basically, whether you're living at home with your parents and you're just starting out in life, or you have roommates, or your financial situation with your partner, your family still, you're kind of underwater. You have a negative net worth, you have negative cash flow, you need help paying bills. And that may be in the form of credit cards, or getting loans, or getting help from family members or friends or people in the community. So these are different ways that you're sort of at that level. And you're working, you may be still in school trying to get that education or job training or trade that's going to help you break out of that. But during this period, it's rough. And I've been there, and I know, almost everybody's been there. I mean, very few people are fortunate enough to never have to go through this stage. I mean, if you're a child and living at home, everybody's been through that. I don't know any independent babies, but for the most part, don't knock yourself if you're here. You just need to make a plan. And most people do have a plan to move forward and get to the next stage, which is being solvent. So this next stage is solvency. And this is where a lot of people are. I spent a lot of my life here, especially when I was younger, living paycheck to paycheck. I had a zero net worth. I mean, all the money was coming in, was going out. Now, at the time when I was younger, right after college or during my hiatus when I was in between finishing college, I was working a lot. So I was making money, and I did have a zero net worth because I wasn't saving any money, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. But some of that stuff was under my control. I was going out, hanging out with my friends, having a good time, socializing. So I wasn't exactly very frugal or prudent with my money. I was definitely enjoying it, but I wasn't building up a nest egg or building up and having any savings to protect me in case something went wrong. And I heard this statistic that most Americans, I think the number is between 65 and 70%, if I'm not mistaken, don't have between $400 and $1,000 to cover an emergency. And I was definitely in that situation. I had things happen with my car, but brakes went out, transmission went out. I was in big trouble because I didn't have enough money to saved up. I'd have to like grab another job, work more hours, do something to sort of offset that. And a lot of times, maybe even borrow money. I don't even remember having a credit card at the time when those types of things were happening. So that is when you're solvent, and you really do want to you want to get a handle on your spending and start to track, start to figure out at this stage what you can do, what steps you can make to sort of get out of this phase. And sometimes that means getting another job. I mean, at one point I had 3 jobs. So it was, but controlling that spending too. You've got to get a handle. It's two-sided, right? You got to get a handle on the spending, and you've got to get a handle on the income. And you really want to break out of this. I mean, you can be living here, but it's not a great place to stay. What we'd like to, at the very least, do is get to this next stage, which is stable. And this is when you start to have some savings. You start to have a little more money left over at the end of the month. You know that saying, you have more month than money at the end of the month. This is when it's the reverse. You're finally getting to that point where, there's a little bit left over. And you probably start to have like a small net worth, less than 25K. I mean, it may be as little as $1,000, but that's still a start. And you have some money and you're starting to sort of implement and follow some basic strategies for getting your financial house in order. Um, there's probably more work to do, more to learn, but this is sort of like that. You start to see that crack, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel to know that, you may still have debt though. And that's the thing. A lot of times that debt can rob you that long-term growth or long-term financial success. So you still have to do some things and take care of that. But you are able to sock away just a little bit of money each month at this stage, which takes us to the next stage, which is strategy. And I think this is a critical stage for a lot of people, myself included. And this is when you start to increase your financial knowledge. This is when you start to put a game plan in action. You really start to understand the value of money. You really start to understand that there are other vehicles that you can put your money in. Because in the previous stage, you may have already capped out savings in terms of cutting your cost. You may already be at the limit of how much beans and rice you can eat. And you've got a roommate, and you're doing all these other cost cutting measures, but there's still some things that you need to do strategically to sort of move yourself forward. And when you're in this strategy stage, you can start to see your net worth grow. This is when you start to really see some progress. You've got that consistent savings, but you're also putting that savings to work. This is when you start to increase your knowledge and start looking at investing. This is when you're in that investing phase, and it may be small, maybe simple and super conservative, which is probably the right thing for the majority of people, quite frankly, especially at this stage. It's just stocking that money away where that money can start to work for you, even if it's bringing back a few percentage points a year, 3 to 5 to 7%. That's great. You're on your way and you're starting to make your way forward. And so in this strategic phase, I like to think of this as a phase where you really just kind of want to solidify your strategy and learn so you can start to implement some of those tactics to move yourself forward. Now, the next stage is a great one. This is one that feels really, really good when you can achieve this. And this is the debt freedom phase. This is when you have eliminated your consumer debt, no student loans, no credit cards. Now, the mortgage thing is debatable. You'll find tons of people. I mean, there's like the Dave Ramsey camp that says you're not debt free until the mortgage is paid off. And there's some merit to that if you feel a certain way about that. I'm not really 100% in that camp, but I understand it. I can appreciate why people would feel that way. But at the very least, no consumer debt, no high interest debt that's just really eating away at your ability to build wealth. So you want to get to this phase, and this is when you really start to see that that's more than just a little bit of light. You can it's like a running back. You see daylight. You can start running forward, and you can see the end zone. Like you can see it. You got a long way still to get there, but you can see it. And so I think this is a great place to be. It takes a lot of pressure and stress off of you, not worrying about that phone ringing or that mail coming and about late notices and increased fees and all these kinds of things, because you're in a better place. And the money is starting to work for you, and it's no longer going out the door and working against you, which takes us to that next phase. Now, this next phase, you start to get into some actual like calculations. I would say, for these earlier phases, pretty simple. You're saving some money. You can save. You have this money in a certain range. Your savings or net worth in a certain range, and no debt. But now it's time to start to look at building into that flexibility phase. It's like, okay, how do I measure where I am? In the flexibility phase, I like. I've actually been here, and I will caution you. I'll save that for later. But in this phase, when your net worth is greater than 2 times your annual expenses, and it's at this stage that it's really a place where you can make some different decisions. And this is where I would caution you. You can change careers. Say you have a high stress, high income career, and you want to start to switch gears. You've got some money saved up. You want to take a shot at maybe some entrepreneurial things. Might want to be a consultant on your own, go off on your own, hang out your own shingle. I've done this. This is where I got to before a few years ago, when I started traveling the world, actually. This is the position I was in when I started doing the digital nomad thing internationally, where my net worth was more than a couple of years of my two times my annual expenses. I left my full time job. I wanted to work on my own apps in the App Store, and that was my dream, was to be an indie dev, to win Apple Design Awards and have all this glory. That didn't happen, and so this is where I caution you. You can get to this place, you can make these decisions, but don't think that you can't move back to the prior levels if you don't keep your eye on the ball and watch your finances. It's very, very easy to get into a situation where, say, for instance, like me, late or non paying clients, expenses are going up, and necessarily getting the income you were expecting from these products that you're launching. And you'll look up, and it doesn't take long, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Like, I was in a much better place. Here it is, 12 to 18 months later. I never imagined I would be here. And that's why you really want to be mindful and make sure that you are constantly tracking and constantly staying on top. And sometimes you have to make some intermediate decisions. One of the things that I would have to say my personal flaw is, I wasn't willing to let go of the dream um, as early as I did. And it was very frustrating because I felt like I'd worked a long time to get to that point, that I deserved it. I deserved my opportunity to fight. And this was my second time doing it too. So I had already done the go back and get a job thing. And I was like, do I really have to do this again? It's like, why isn't this working for me? But the reality is, if you make some moves and you're mindful, you can stay in this flexibility. It may mean that you have to take some additional part time work, you may have to do some other things, but just to make sure you maintain that level. And one of the things that I didn't do was set this new level as the bottom floor for myself. I was so used to previously living like a college student, because I typically did that for most of my life. Never really spent a lot of money on anything except for hobbies. And so it didn't trigger. I wasn't triggered by, a dwindling bank balance. It didn't bother me at all, because it was like I didn't really care that much about the money. It was like, okay, it's sitting there and it wasn't doing anything. And it wasn't doing anything, which is the big lesson that I learned this time, is that money's got to go to work. That money has to work as hard, if not harder, than you do. And so if you want to stay in this flexibility phase and move forward, you want to be mindful of that. You want to make sure you kind of set some, basically, like stop losses, some levels at which you say, okay, maybe I'm trying this new thing in a career, but if my levels hit below this metric, then I know I've got to do some stopgap things to keep money coming in until I can get this ball going the right way, the way that I want to moving forward. So then that takes us finally into the financial security. Well, not finally, we've got a couple more stages. Sorry about that. Security. And this is where, for me, it's a little bit different. And this is where my focus is now, is that I'm getting into the security phase, but my focus, the metric, is different. And that is that my passive income needs to be greater than my annual expenses, at least 1x at the minimum. And this is what would keep me out of that dropping back down to the previous levels. Now, for a lot of people, they take this a different way. They downsize their careers, maybe work part time. A lot of people do what's called barista fire. So they've got to this point where they've got passive income coming in, that's taking care of their expenses, and then they kind of take it easy and take their foot off the gas. I'm not seeing it that way this time. I've had enough experience doing the last few iterations, along with the mini retirements and all these things, that for me, it's putting my foot on the gas. It's time to accelerate. So I'll drop a link in the description for the multiple income streams that I'm working on, because the goal is to absolutely positively just hammer it, because I'm not trying to relive those situations again. I'm not trying to go back and repeat the past. I've lived that. I've experienced that. I'm good. Like, I'm ready to move forward. So, but for a lot of people, it's okay. It's like, maybe that's not what you want. And if you've got passive income coming in and it's greater than your living expenses, I mean, that's the dream for a lot of people. And it does provide you that security. Maybe you spend your time doing other things like volunteering and doing the kinds of things that you want to do. And you're not trying to wait until you hit some higher financial number. And I think that's perfectly okay. And if that's what you want to do, this is the level, and celebrate it. You've gotten to the place that you want to get to. And that's one of those other takeaways, is you can't live other people's dreams. You can't do the kinds of things that other people want to do just because you see someone on television or the internet like me, or some celebrity or something. It's just like, that's great. The things that they want to pursue, it's good for them. If it doesn't match the what you want to do, then it doesn't. Maybe there's some things you can take away from it. Some of the habits, some of the hobbies, some of the introspections and lessons they've learned. That's great. But you're not trying to get to this. Everybody doesn't want to be a billionaire. A lot of people aren't even trying. It's like, it's not a goal. So, and that's perfectly fine. So let's move on from this phase into financial freedom. And then financial freedom is kind of like, this is where I'm targeting for myself. This is where my goals are for where I'm headed. And this freedom is where my net worth is greater than 12 and a half times my annual expenses. And this is where my investments are working for me. Because at this point, my investments will keep growing, that even if I don't contribute any more money to it, I'll be able to retire whenever I decide that I want to retire, which honestly probably won't be for a long time. I've done enough retiring. I'll drop a link to the mini retirements and you'll understand why. But this is the Coast Fire number. This is the number that I'll be targeting. So if you look at my fire reports, as I report monthly on my status and my progress towards the goal, this is where I'm headed. This is the number that I'm targeting, my Coast Fire number, which is $284,000. So that's like, when I get to that point, then I know that the investments are working for me. The dollars are bringing back friends, and my future is going to be okay. Provided, even if the market downturns or something like that over time, because it's long term, I'm very, very confident that it'll be okay. Okay. But even though that's the freedom number, that's not it for a lot of people. A lot of people, quite frankly, are hammering, hammering, hammering to get to this next level, which is financial independence, or that fire number. This is where we get the financial independence, retire early. And this is the absolute goal for a lot of people. And that is when their net worth is greater than 25 times their annual expenses. And this is based on this Trinity study, this idea that if you are withdrawing at 4%, that 25 times your annual expenses should be enough that you can just withdraw at that rate, and you won't deplete your money in retirement. The Trinity study is actually being challenged, quite frankly, a couple of times. And some people are arguing the number's too high, the number's too low. There's so many unknowns. I don't worry about that, just because, again, I don't plan to retire early, maybe not at all. And so that's not necessarily going to affect me. I probably will always have something going on that will bring in some income, active income, no matter what my passive income is doing. But if this is your target and this is where you're headed, this is great. This is like the big celebration thing that is just, this is the movement. This is the movement that everybody's kind of jumping onto, even though they kind of might have modified in some of those previous forms that I've highlighted in the prior stages. But then there's actually a level beyond this. And this is financial abundance. And when you get to abundance, this is like, money in a thing. You know what I'm saying? Just throwing money out the window, I guess. I don't know. It's never been my dream, but you can do what you want to do. And if you want to ride private jets or whatever, you can do that. And I know for a segment of people, this is the dream. This is absolutely where they're trying to go. They don't just want to be free. They absolutely want this abundance. And maybe they're doing some other things besides buying planes. They want to donate and have impact in their community and society at large. And I think that's amazing. I'm like, if you want to go to this level, then, this is beyond just you, at that point. It's bigger than just your 25x number for your own living comfort and retirement and everything. This is about impacting the lives of other people. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I think, if you can achieve this in that way and you want to do this and you can provide that, then I really hats off to you. I think it's a great goal to have and set. And that's why I put it here. Because again, even though I'm stopping a couple of levels before this, I think these levels are important. They're vital. I think they're valuable, I think, for other people. So I want you to share them all. And as I said, I will be using this level system as a part of my journey as I'm tracking those fire reports. So if you want to follow along with that journey, I'll be dropping some of these reports very soon. I actually have a backlog, so kind of catch up on the beginning of this story. Click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and you will get a reminder when these videos drop. Also, if you hit that like button, it really helps other people find this. It helps the channel. It's a very new channel. I'm just getting started, and I really appreciate all the support. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around this long and paying attention. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below as well. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I'll get to them as soon as I can. I usually get to them pretty fast. So when I can, if I'm not doing one of the 7 income stream things, but I do appreciate it, and we'll get to it. Hope everyone has an amazing day, and I wish you the best on your own journey. And I will talk to you next time. Cheers.